They say the most life-altering moments don't announce themselves with a crash or a roar. They slip in quietly, like a thief in the night, catching you when you least expect it. I never thought a mundane trip to the grocery store could unravel the threads of my carefully stitched-together life, but that's exactly what happened. It started with an ordinary day, and ended with a moment I'll never forget. If only I'd known what was coming, maybe I would have braced myself. Or maybe, just maybe, I wouldn't have walked into that store at all. The morning began as predictably as the hundreds before it. I woke up to the same creaks of my aging house, the same sunlight sneaking through the cracks in the curtains, and the same dull ache in my chest that had settled there ever since Mark passed away 3 years ago. It wasn't grief anymore, not exactly, it was something quieter, something heavier. It was unremarkable, unmemorable, until it wasn't. I was standing there, holding a box of cereal I didn't even plan to buy, when I saw him. He wasn't supposed to matter, just a young man working the late shift, scanning barcodes and making small talk with tired customers. But something about him stopped me in my tracks. Maybe it was the way he carried himself, tall and effortless, like he belonged to a world far more vibrant than the one I inhabited. Or maybe it was his face, a face so striking it looked like it had been plucked from the pages of a novel, sharp jawline, unruly hair, and eyes that seemed to hold secrets even the world couldn't uncover. I don't know what it was, but I felt it, a pull. A spark. And for the first time in years, my heart wasn't just beating, it was racing. I froze, cereal box in hand, as his gaze drifted toward me. I should have looked away. I should have kept walking. But I didn't. And in that single, fleeting moment, I felt something stir deep inside me, something I thought I'd lost forever. I didn't expect to see him again. Not in a place like that, amidst the mundane hum of shopping carts and the sterile glow of overhead lights. But there he was, Jake, leaning over a shelf, restocking canned goods with a casual ease that seemed out of place in this small-town grocery store. He was young, early 30s maybe, with striking blue eyes that stood out even from a distance. His tousled hair fell effortlessly across his forehead, and the faintest hint of a smile played on his lips as he worked. I tried to keep my distance, convincing myself I was too old, too invisible to catch his eye. But as fate would have it, our paths crossed in the cereal aisle. He glanced up, eyes locking onto mine with a warmth that melted the years between us. "Need a hand with that?" he asked, gesturing to the oversized bag of cat food I was struggling to lift. His voice was smooth, comforting, with just the right amount of curiosity. My cheeks flushed, a reaction I hadn't felt in decades. "Oh, thank you," I managed, my voice wavering as I passed him the bag. His hands, strong, capable, made quick work of the task, and as he set the bag in my cart, our fingers brushed ever so slightly. It was a fleeting touch, barely noticeable, but it sent a jolt through me that I couldn't ignore. We exchanged a few words, just small talk, the kind you forget as soon as it's spoken. But the way he looked at me, the genuine kindness in his eyes, lingered long after I left the store. As I drove home, the radio played softly in the background, but I couldn't focus on the lyrics. All I could think about was him, the way he smiled, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he laughed. By the time I reached my front door, I realized something had shifted inside me, a small, hesitant flutter of something I hadn't felt in years. Hope, perhaps. Or maybe it was just the thrill of being seen, really seen, by someone who looked at me like I was more than just another face in the crowd. After that encounter, my trips to the grocery store became more frequent. I found myself inventing reasons to go back: fresh bread, a forgotten carton of milk, a new brand of tea I just had to try. Each visit was a chance to see him again, to feel that rush of excitement as our eyes met across the aisles. But with every interaction came an internal battle. I was 54, a widow with laugh lines and gray streaks weaving through my hair. What could someone like Jake, youthful and full of promise, possibly see in me? The doubt gnawed at me, whispering that I was foolish for even entertaining the idea. And yet, I couldn't help myself. Each time he greeted me, his smile felt like sunshine breaking through the clouds. The way he asked about my day, genuinely interested, made me feel more alive than I had in years. It was as if he saw beyond the wrinkles and the weary eyes, into the person I had once been. The woman who laughed easily, who believed in love and second chances. In those moments with Jake, I began to rediscover parts of myself I thought were long gone. I started wearing my favorite dresses again, the ones I had pushed to the back of the closet after Mark passed. I dusted off old records, letting the music fill my home with memories and forgotten dreams. Even my bookstore felt different, infused with the same energy I felt blooming inside me. Late at night, as I sat alone in my living room, the memories of Mark would drift in like ghosts, gentle reminders of a life that once was. But instead of the ache that usually followed, there was something else, a curiosity about what the future might hold. I had spent so long convincing myself that my story was over, that this chapter of my life was meant to be written in solitude. But Jake, with his easygoing charm and unguarded kindness, made me wonder if there was still a new chapter waiting to be written. And so, I found myself on the precipice of something unknown, something thrilling. It was terrifying, yes, but also exhilarating. Because as much as I feared the judgment of others, the whispers of impropriety, I feared even more the regret of letting this chance slip away. Life had surprised me once, pulling me into darkness when I lost Mark. But maybe, just maybe, it was about to surprise me again, this time with light. With each passing day, my interactions with Jake became more than just small talk. We shared stories, me, about the books I loved and the places I dreamt of visiting, and him, about his plans and the life he hoped to build. His laughter became the soundtrack of my evenings, his words a balm to the loneliness I had accepted as my fate. I began to consider the unthinkable, inviting him for coffee, suggesting a walk by the lake, breaking free from the walls I had built around myself. The fear of rejection, of being seen as desperate or inappropriate, loomed large. But the fear of never knowing what could have been was even greater. In the quiet of the night, as the world outside my window drifted to sleep, I made a decision. I would take a chance. I would let myself believe that maybe, after all these years, there was still room for love, for connection, for a story that hadn't yet been told. It happened on a rainy Thursday afternoon, the kind of day that made you crave a warm drink and a good book. The sound of soft raindrops tapping against the shop's window panes created a soothing backdrop to my usual routine. I was shelving a new collection of novels when the bell above the door jingled, and there he was, Jake, standing in the doorway, shaking droplets of rain from his tousled hair. "Hey, Laura," he said, his voice carrying that effortless warmth I had come to treasure. His smile, genuine and unguarded, felt like a ray of sunshine cutting through the gloom of the day. "Jake!" I exclaimed, a little too enthusiastically, quickly masking my excitement with a casual tone. "What brings you here?" He held up a slightly crumpled paperback, the kind we sold for a few dollars in the shop's bargain bin. "I finished the book I picked up last time. Thought I'd stop by for a recommendation." My heart skipped a beat at the thought that he'd come back, specifically for me. I gestured to the reading corner near the window, where soft armchairs and stacks of books invited customers to linger. "Well, you've come to the right place," I said with a smile. "Why don't you sit down while I find something for you?" Jake made his way to the corner, settling into one of the armchairs. As I sifted through the shelves, searching for the perfect book, I stole a glance at him. He looked completely at ease, his tall frame relaxed, his eyes wandering over the shop's cozy decor. When I returned, holding a couple of options, I noticed him gazing at an old globe I had placed by the window. "Here," I said, handing him the books. "I think you'll like these. One's a classic adventure, and the other's a bit more reflective, perfect for a rainy day." He took the books from my hands, his fingers brushing mine for a brief moment. "Thanks, Laura," he said, his blue eyes meeting mine with a sincerity that made my chest tighten. I hesitated for a second before speaking, the words tumbling out before I could overthink. "Would you like a cup of tea?" He leaned forward slightly, his elbows resting on his knees, as he listened intently to my story about finding a rare first edition in a dusty old market. "You've got such a passion for this place," he said, gesturing to the shop around us. "It's inspiring, really. You make people feel at home here." His words took me by surprise, stirring something deep inside me. I glanced down at my tea, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the drink. "Thank you, Jake," I said softly, my voice laced with genuine emotion. "That means more than you know." The rain began to let up, and Jake glanced at his watch, a hint of reluctance in his expression. "I should probably head out," he said, setting his mug on the table. "But this was really nice. I don't think I've had a conversation like this in a long time." I smiled, feeling the same way but not wanting to say goodbye just yet. "Well, you know where to find me," I said, trying to keep my tone light. "The tea and the books are always here." As he stood and made his way to the door, he turned back, his smile soft but meaningful. "I'll definitely be back, Laura. Thanks for today." And just like that, he was gone, leaving behind an empty chair and a heart that felt fuller than it had in years. I sat there for a while, sipping my tea and staring out at the damp street. For the first time in a long time, I felt a glimmer of something I hadn't dared to name: hope. The sound of the rain had faded into a distant hum, and the bookstore was wrapped in a stillness that felt almost sacred. Jake was still sitting in the reading corner, his tall frame relaxed yet undeniably present. I lingered nearby, pretending to tidy up a stack of books, though my mind was racing. There was something unspoken in the air between us, something I hadn't felt in years but couldn't deny any longer. My hand trembled slightly as I approached him, holding onto the edges of my cardigan like a lifeline. I didn't know where the courage came from. Maybe it was the warmth of our earlier conversation, or maybe it was the years of longing that had finally built up to this moment. But as I stepped closer, I knew I couldn't let the moment slip away. "Jake," I said softly, my voice barely above a whisper. He looked up at me, his piercing blue eyes meeting mine with an openness that made my heart flutter. I hesitated for a moment, searching for the right words, before finally speaking. I want to thank you for today. For making me feel seen." His brow furrowed slightly, and he tilted his head, as if trying to decipher the deeper meaning behind my words. "You're easy to talk to, Laura," he replied, his voice gentle but steady. "I don't think I've ever met anyone like you." The sincerity in his words hit me like a wave, and before I could stop myself, I reached out, placing a hand lightly on his arm. The touch was soft, almost hesitant, but it carried with it a weight of unspoken emotion. "You've made me feel something I thought I'd lost," I confessed, my voice trembling. "It's been so long since I've felt this alive, this connected." Jake's expression shifted, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. His body tensed slightly under my touch, but he didn't pull away. Instead, he held my gaze, his own emotions playing out in the subtle shifts of his jaw and the way his hands fidgeted in his lap. "Laura," he began, his voice trailing off as if he didn't know what to say. I took a deep breath, willing myself to keep going despite the fear clawing at my chest. "I know this might seem unusual," I said, my words carefully chosen. "And I know there's an age gap, but I don't feel it when I'm with you. You make me forget all the reasons why I thought I couldn't feel this way again." Jake's hesitation was palpable, but there was something else there too, a curiosity, a vulnerability that mirrored my own. "I don't know what to say," he admitted, his voice barely audible. "You're incredible, Laura. You really are." "But it's okay," I interrupted gently, offering him a reassuring smile. "I don't want you to feel pressured. I needed to tell you how I feel. Because for the first time in years, I feel like I've found something worth holding on to." The silence that followed was thick with tension, the kind that made the air between us feel almost electric. Jake's gaze dropped to my hand still resting on his arm, and I could see the conflict warring within him. Finally, he looked back up, his blue eyes meeting mine with an intensity that sent a shiver down my spine. "You're amazing, Laura," he said, his voice firmer now, though still tinged with uncertainty. "I didn't expect this, but I can't ignore it either." His words were like a balm to my soul, and I felt a surge of courage I hadn't known I possessed. Slowly, I moved closer, my heart pounding in my chest as I searched his face for any sign that I should stop. But he didn't move away. If anything, he leaned in slightly, his body instinctively mirroring mine. "Jake," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the sound of my own heartbeat. "I just want you to know that you've reminded me what it feels like to be alive. And for that, I'll always be grateful." His lips parted as if to speak, but instead, he simply nodded, the weight of the moment stealing the words from both of us. Slowly, I pulled my hand away, giving him the space to process what had just happened. But as I did, he reached out, his fingers brushing against mine in a gesture that was as tender as it was unexpected. "Laura," he said softly, his voice steady now, "you've reminded me too of what it means to feel something real." The world seemed to fade away in that moment, leaving just the two of us in the quiet cocoon of the bookstore. It wasn't just about attraction or longing, it was about connection, about finding something true in a world that often felt so empty. And as we sat there, our hands barely touching, I knew that this was a turning point. Not just for me, but for both of us. The smell of freshly brewed coffee filled the air as Jake sat at my dining table, his laughter echoing softly against the walls of my quiet home. It was a sound I hadn't heard in what felt like years, a sound that brought life back into a house that had long been filled only with silence. We were supposed to part ways after the bookstore, but something about the evening felt incomplete, and so I found myself asking him to stay for dinner. To my surprise, he agreed with a warm smile that made my heart flutter. Dinner wasn't anything extravagant, just a simple pasta dish I'd thrown together with the ingredients I had on hand. But as we sat there, sharing stories over plates of food and glasses of wine, it felt like the most meaningful meal I'd ever prepared. Jake told me about his dreams, his struggles, and the unexpected twists that had brought him to my small town. In return, I shared pieces of myself I hadn't dared to revisit in years. There was something so natural about it, as if we'd known each other for far longer than just a handful of encounters. "You've got a way of making everything seem lighter," Jake said, his eyes meeting mine as he swirled his fork through his pasta. "It's like, for the first time in a long while, I can just be." His words made me pause, my chest tightening with a mix of gratitude and disbelief. "You've done the same for me," I admitted, my voice soft but steady. "I didn't realize how much I'd closed myself off until you came along." As the evening went on, the conversation ebbed and flowed effortlessly, punctuated by laughter and moments of quiet reflection. Jake's presence felt like sunlight breaking through a stormy sky, warming parts of me I hadn't even realized had grown cold. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a woman stuck in the past. I felt alive, present, and full of possibilities. When the last sip of wine was taken and the plates were cleared, we found ourselves sitting on the couch, the atmosphere softer now, more intimate. Jake turned to me, his expression thoughtful. "I don't know what this is," he said, his voice low but sincere. "But I know it feels right." "It does," I whispered, my heart racing as I placed my hand lightly over his. "And maybe we don't need to define it right now. Maybe we just let it be." The moment hung between us, charged with unspoken understanding and the quiet thrill of something new. And as Jake leaned back, his hands still resting on mine, I realized that this wasn't just the start of something with him, it was the start of something within myself. A rediscovery of the woman I used to be, and the woman I was becoming again. As I watched Jake drive away that night, his taillights disappearing into the quiet street, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. It wasn't just about him, it was about the way he'd reminded me of the beauty in taking risks, in stepping outside the walls I'd built around myself. For so long, I'd let fear and routine dictate my life, but now, for the first time, I felt free. The bookstore was dark when I returned to lock up for the night, but it didn't feel empty. It felt full of promise, of the stories yet to be written, both on the shelves and in my own life. As I turned the key and stepped out into the crisp night air, a peaceful smile played on my lips. This was just the beginning, and I couldn't wait to see what came next. Life can change in an instant, can't it? One chance meeting, one unexpected moment, and suddenly, everything feels new again. If Laura's story reminded you of the power of connection, courage, or taking a leap of faith, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your own stories of rediscovery in the comments below. I read every single one, and they inspire me just as much as these tales do. And hey, if you felt even a spark of inspiration or curiosity, why not join this journey? Hit that subscribe button below, and don't forget to turn on notifications, that little bell right there, so you'll be the first to know when the next story drops. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. More incredible stories, more moments that make us pause and reflect, are just around the corner. Thank you for watching, for being part of this community, and for believing in the beauty of life's unexpected chapters. Until next time, take care, take risks, and keep discovering the stories that matter. See you soon.